bill does is that in this bill, under this bill, an employer that has a negative account, that is a negative account employer, can only apply for a shared work application within 12 months of the Secretary's announcement of a recession. And they can only participate in one plan for a 5-year period. What this amendment does is it strikes that portion, and it allows a negative account employer to participate in a shared work program as long as their most recent calculated reserve ratio has improved over the previous year. So as long as the company is showing in good faith that their account ratio is improving year after year, they are allowed to continue to keep those employees working and paying those employees benefits under the work shared program.
Okay, the amendment is seconded by Representative Long. And did you get your Outlook up? Okay. Charles, are you here? Are you with us, Charles?
Mr. Chair, it appears that Charles has stepped away from his desk for a moment. And also the meeting, the WebEx element of the meeting seems to have perhaps been just a bit behind the committee room in terms of getting started.
All right, we'll just hold on there for a minute while until Charles gets back. Eddie, while we're waiting, can you tell me who seconded the original motion on the bill of Representative Long?
In my notes, I have Representative Carpenter as having been the original second on February 18th.
Okay, so Representative Will Carpenter seconded the original motion to pass the bill out favorably. Is that what you have on record?
Yeah, that's what my notes reflect.
Okay. Representative Kessler, would you have a copy of that amendment that you could send to Cindy to send out? Okay, thanks. Looks like everyone has a copy of that amendment. Seems to be a simple amendment, so we probably don't need Charles to explain it unless somebody would like him to. We can wait till he gets back. Otherwise, we can discuss the amendment. Okay, any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion seconded by Representative Long. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no. Motion passes. For further discussion on the bill, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an amendment.
If you have a copy of it, would you send it to Cindy?
I did, okay. And she should be sending it now. This amendment has to do with, originally we had sent this bill proposal to the U.S. Department of Labor for review, and in that review, it was brought up that we did not have the landman portion of this covered correctly with U.S. Department of Labor. So this is a fix for that. And it occurs on page 21, line 22, and line 37.
Can I get a second on the amendment? Representative Sutton. Any discussion on the amendment?
Everybody's
got it?
Good.
Seeing no discussion, you can close.
I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Sutton. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no. Motion passes. For further discussion, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an amendment, and I will send it over to Cindy right now.
Charles, you want to explain the amendment? I see you're back.
Is he back?
Oh, he's left again. Representative, you want to take a stab at it?
I will. I'm trying to do two things at a time.
Okay. Well, Charles is back now, so maybe he can explain it. Charles, we were talking about an amendment of Representative Sutton's.
Okay, Chairman, one moment and I'll bring that up.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman and members of the committee, this amendment pertains to a procedure whereby the Secretary is to develop and implement to address claimants who decline to return to suitable work or refuse to accept an offer of suitable work without good cause. And the additional language, which you'll see on page 3 of the attachment of the balloon, provides that such procedures are to include the receipt and processing of job refusal reports from employers, evaluation of such reports, considering the claimant's work history, skills, suitability of offered employment, and guidelines for determination of whether the claimant shall remain eligible for unemployment benefits or has failed to meet the work search requirements of the subsection. So the Secretary is in determining whether the employment offer is suitable. The Secretary is to consider whether the employment offers wages comparable to the claimant's recent employment and work duties, which is kind of the standard analysis that the Secretary uses. And then the Secretary is also to consider whether the employment offers wages of at least the amount of the claimant's maximum weekly benefits. The language goes on to state that to facilitate those requirements that I just discussed, the Secretary is to provide readily accessible means for employers to notify the department when a claimant refuses to return to work or refuses an offer of employment. And nothing in this subsection is to be construed as to require an employer to report such job refusals. At the time of notice of receipt from an employer pursuant to that paragraph, the Secretary has 10 days after receipt of the notice from the employer to provide a notice to the claimant who has refused to return to work or to accept an offer of suitable employment. And that notice is to contain certain specified information. That includes a summary of state employment security law regarding the duties to return to work or accept suitable work, a statement that the claimant has been or may be disqualified, because the Secretary has noted may disqualify the claimant based on the Secretary's determination and analysis. And the claimant's right to collect benefits has been or may be terminated for refusal to return to work or accept suitable work without good cause. And additionally, an explanation of what constitutes suitable work under the employment security law. And finally, instructions for contesting the denial of a claim if the denial is based upon a report by an employer that the claimant has refused to return to work or has refused to accept an offer of suitable work. So again, in summary, this balloon provides a process for the Secretary to be notified by employers of a claimant's refusal to return to work or to accept a suitable offer, and provisions for notice to the claimant.
Representative Miller, did you have a question for the revisor on the amendment, or did you just want to speak to it? Any questions on the amendment? I'm going to let the representative explain his amendment, and then we'll go on to questions for him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Charles described perfectly. This is just to outline a process. We had conversation in here over and over about returning to work being not necessarily that an applicant would have to return to work if it was suitable and so forth. And that's why there's language included in there about things like the salary must be, equitable to where they were prior to being laid off or terminated. But yeah, this just outlines a process that I didn't want left up to promulgation by rules and regs, because I know how long that can take. So we wanted to outline the process here so that we have it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, in committee, this language was taken pretty much out of a UPOL that was sent by the U.S. Department of Labor on how to do this. It's actually their law that we have to do this anyway, and so we're putting it into statute.
I really wanted to take credit for that language, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the concern raised by this amendment. I've had some legislative experience, albeit a long, long time ago, about this area of the law, and I do not feel comfortable voting to amend without a hearing on something this substantial. And I'm not saying I wouldn't support it once we had heard from interested parties, but there are a lot of nuances, as you learn when you have a full hearing and you hear from all sides on these issues. So I won't be supporting the amendment, not because I'm necessarily opposed to it, but for me, it's the process. This is one area that I would appreciate a more elaborate process before I was asked to make a decision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the carrier of the amendment, so I understand that we're trying to get more in line with what that language that we have at the federal level, but my big concern is in regards to child care issues. Do we have anything defined in that? Because again, and I know that a lot of members of this committee have expressed frustration about about remote school. It's something that I've dealt with as well, and I would not have been able to go back to work this fall because I did not have that child care So how does that work? Does that fall within the suitability standards? Is there a, any sort of standard in regards to that? Because again, I do feel like we need to be looking at all of this nuance, showing this sympathy to people who have a lot of these circumstances that are not just work related, that are beyond their control.
Thank you for that question, and that was a consideration. I did not include that terminology in here because it seems to me that that would be part of the adjudication process that the panel would look at if, is this a reasonable request for them to return to work? It seems to me that those extenuating circumstances, and a number of extenuating circumstances I can think of, should probably be handled in that adjudication.
Well, I do understand that. I will need to vote no on this, primarily because history has shown us that people are not terribly sympathetic to caregivers when it comes to work-related issues, whether it's elder care or whether it's child care. So, as the, female sandwich generation representative here, I'm just going to be a no on that, because we need to be looking after those people. They need income for their families, and perhaps we could look at this reform during not difficult times, but this just seems like it might hit women particularly hard. Thank you.
Committee, for your review, I have sent the letter that came from the U.S. Department of Labor, and the return to work reporting requirement is listed on page 14 and 15 in that. You can take a look at that at your convenience. Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this question would be for the carrier of the amendment or the reviser, but I would like some context about the difference between this and what methods and processes we currently use. I just want to get a sense of, compared to what we're doing now, what this language would do.
According to the Department of Labor, they're doing this now. And according to the U.S. Department of Labor, we absolutely have to do this in order to continue to collect the coronavirus extra dollars.
I guess maybe that's my question, is if we're doing it now, what are we doing with this? It seems, if we're following USDOL guidelines now, and these are USDOL guidelines, I'm struggling to understand what we're doing differently here than what we're already doing.
Representative.
I could certainly make up an answer, but I would feel more comfortable first throwing the ball to Charles and see what he has to say.
I'm sorry, I was in the middle of trying to do something and I didn't quite catch the question. I understand what is the difference between what the department does now and what this new provision provides? Is that correct?
That is correct.
I really don't have anything to add to what the chairman said. I mean, the balloon, I think, makes clear that that the secretary can obtain information from employers as to whether or not the claimant has declined to return to work or refused an offer of work. So, that's clearly stated in the law with this amendment. And then there is, the notice provision, but I really don't really have anything to add to what the chairman said.
Excellent. That's really where I was going to. Thank you, Charles. And Mr. Chairman, that's really where I was going to go. And this is just a clarification of a process that I wanted to make sure was in place so that it wasn't left subject to interpretation of legislative intent that can get very murky in rules and regulations.
And I just add to that this is current USDOL law, and we're codifying it in our statutes so that we'll continue to do this even after the coronavirus funds are no longer coming. Any further discussion? Seeing none, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do close.
Committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Long. All in favor say aye. All against say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Highland, further discussion on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an amendment. I have sent it to Cindy for distribution. Basically, this amendment, it piggybacks on Representative Williams' amendment. She's going to do the audit, but I'm asking for an annual report from the agency to the committee, both House and Senate, and that's essentially what this amendment does. And Charles, fill in if I forgot anything.
Charles Reimer.
Yes, Chairman, one moment. Just opening up that one. Yes, so as Representative Highland indicated, if you look at page 2 of the amendment, you'll see that there are 2 provisions there. The first provision is that the council is to conduct an independent audit and evaluation that is to occur within fiscal year 2024 and completed not later than July 1, 2024, and then every 3 years thereafter, of course, if the council is in existence. The scope of the audit is to include a review as directed by the council of the unemployment compensation system. It includes an examination of basically the scope of the council's duties as are set forth in the bill in sections D, E, and section 2 of the bill. And that includes an examination of the system processes, the technological infrastructure, recommended system improvements, system efficiency, system integrity, employer and claimant user experience, and the ability of the system to adapt to fluctuations in the number of claimants or other potential stressors to the system. So basically, it's an audit of that follows the council's duties with respect to examination of the Department of Labor, and it is an audit of the Department of Labor with respect to those areas. The independent firm is not to have access to confidential information. The independent firm makes a report to the council. It's posted on the Secretary's website. The audit is paid for by the state, subject to appropriations. Written report is provided to the legislature at the beginning of the regular legislative session after the completion of the audit. The independent firm is also to present the audit and testify before the standing committees of the House and Senate on Commerce, and prior to the end of January of the legislative session after the completion of the audit. The second provision is an annual report to the legislature by the council on its activities and also the activities of the secretary with respect to the status and progress on the areas, again, within the scope of the council's duties, that are set forth in the bill. And as I mentioned above, the report is again to be posted to the Secretary's website. The written report is provided to the legislature at the beginning of each regular legislative session, just like the audit. The council is also to present the report and appear before the standing committees on commerce of the House and Senate prior to the end of January of each regular legislative session. So in summary, this balloon provides for an independent audit to be completed in fiscal year 2024. It also provides, and then every 3 years thereafter, it also provides that for an annual report to the legislature by the council on its activities and the activities of the secretary with respect to, status and progress. Basically, it's a status and progress report. And that is what this balloon does.
Highland.
Well, Charles did a great job. It's just requiring these reports to go to the respective committees. And I would put that in the form of an official proposal. I move this amendment be passed.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand what it is. So we've got the initial audit that's going to be done. This is basically an audit to come back and say, this is what we've done.
No, this is as Charles said, every 2 years, they're going to have an audit that they, just like school districts do now, they have to have their audits, and that's reported to the school district. In this case, they're going to report back to the Senate and the House committee what they've done, how they've done it, and where the money is what I asked for.
Okay, Charles, I got a question for you. Would this need to be would this be need to be worded a little bit differently? Because currently we have the council sunsetting in 3 years, and so the council's not always going to be around to do these audits, or possibly could not be. Who would have to be the one that would order these audits, or would they just be automatically done at that point?
Yeah, if the council is no longer in existence, then this provision would also not be in effect. The way it's worded is that, you know, we're going to get one audit in before the council terminates under the sunset. But, you know, we could take a look at that and make sure that this disappears if, you know, when the council sunsets. But I think that would be what would happen.
So, Representative, is it your intent to have this done every 2 years, or only while the council is there?
My intent was every 2 years.
Should we have it be done by the secretary?
Yes.
If the council's no longer in there? Okay, so Charles, can we make that change? Leave it the way it is, but add a statement that if the council is no longer effective, it would be ordered by the secretary.
Certainly.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Representative?
That is.
Okay, so seconded by the Representative Long. Discussion, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree either way, but I would also remind the committee that the sun never sets in Kansas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions or discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Chairman, just for clarification, is it the intent of the committee that the secretary, if the council sunsets, the secretary conducts both of these audits? I guess the secretary could make a report annually. You know, maybe they already do. That would have to be examined. I just want a clarification about whether the continuing obligation to conduct the audit also applies to the report.
My intent is that the audit also is included in that report. Much like the school district do, just like Capers does. They have an independent audit. They report it. That's every 2 years. And if the council disappears, then the secretary will be obligated to carry it forward. That's my intent.
Charles, you're muted.
So, Representative, your intent is an independent audit conducted every 2 years and reported to the legislature every 2 years.
Yes.
Okay. That will require a little bit of reworking here because this balloon provides for the audit every 3 years and an annual report. So we will need to change that to reflect an independent audit every 2 years and a report every 2 years reflecting that audit conducted by either the council or the secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I will withdraw my amendment. I will get with Charles and try to clean this up if possible. If not, we'll forget it.
Okay, is it okay with the second? All right, withdrawn. Representative Burrows, you still have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to speak to the amendment. I know we have a request now with 2 audits, and the legislative post audit was in our purview to utilize, and that audit wouldn't have cost us anything. Now we have an additional audit that will come with a price tag. My question, Mr. Chairman, and maybe staff can help us, are these audits to be paid out of the trust fund monies? Because if they're to be paid out of the trust fund monies, I think that our business partners, if they're that concerned about how those dollars are being spent and want them audited, this would help assure them that those dollars are being spent properly. But I would assume that they want this out of the general fund money. So I'm just looking for some clarification, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we can't take the money out of the unemployment trust fund for anything other than claims. So it's not coming out of there. It just said paid for by the state. So it would be up to the appropriations. It says paid for by the state if appropriated. So it would be up to us, but the amendment's been withdrawn.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of that. We didn't put money forward to modernize this system, but we're putting a number of hurdles and obstacles in place. And I know we're trying to get through this, Mr. Chairman, but I'm just curious about the additional dollars that we're putting toward this bill when we could be using it more towards a modernization. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the bill, Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have an amendment. I did forward it to Cindy.
Charles, I think would you send the most recent version of Auerkamp's amendment to Cindy?
Chairman, I will do so. I have provided that also to Representative Auerkamp, the most recent version.
Okay. Representative, you want to explain?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this simply just adds a kind of a double check. So when an individual becomes employed, the Secretary of Labor knows that they are to send a notice to the the Department of Children and Families, and that will allow them to review and update the status of eligibility on other programs, just kind of a double check to verify the eligibility of food assistance, cash assistance, child care assistance, and others.
Motion seconded by Representative Long. Discussion on the motion. Representative Miller.
I think we have a reference here to Secretary for Labor instead of Secretary of Labor. It's the Department for Children and Families, but it's the Secretary of Labor, and on the fourth line of the amendment it says the Secretary for Labor.
Chairman?
Yeah, I think we had an amendment yesterday that would allow them to clear up little things like that.
Yes, sir, but this gave me a chance to show off. Thank you.
Good catch, Representative. Representative Ousley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So has this been run by anybody from DCF? Because I know that the KDOL system is very much an antique, but so is DCF. I've been asking DCF to share communications for years, and because of their antiquated system, they're just simply unable to, even within the department. And the Department of Children and Families is one of the largest consumers of data of any state department that we have. So I'd really like to hear from somebody from the department before we were to insert this in there.
Well, they've done similar things like this in the past, and they did it through a memorandum of understanding with the DCF to pass the information back and forth. So I know it's been done before. Any other?
Not to my recollection, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Representative Probst?
Not a question so much, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this bill is beginning to become quite the hydra. We are taking a modernization bill and now starting to reach into other departments, and I think that deserves some caution and reservation.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, you can close.
Mr. Chairman, I close and move my amendment.
Committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Long. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no.
No.
Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Charles, if you would send the amendment to Cindy for the 20-year look-back fix.
I will do so, Chairman.
Thank you.
I've sent that to Cindy, so hopefully she will be getting it momentarily.
I think we have several people having issues with their Outlook for some reason. Cindy, let me know when you've received that and sent it. Okay. Okay. So, this is an amendment that I'm going to offer. It's kind of a technical cleanup for a couple of issues. One that was pointed out by the Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Labor, and then the other one was one that we caught. Charles, if you want to explain it.
Certainly, Chairman. So the first thing this amendment does is it changes language on page 5 of the bill. The previous language stated that the council may adopt rules and regulations as necessary to implement the provisions of this section. And this changes that to state that the council may suggest rules and regulations for adoption by the secretary as necessary to implement the provisions of this section. And this addresses a potential issue regarding appropriation of power and, make sure that the rules and regulations part of this is going to be legal. The second part on page 63 of the bill addresses as a committee may recall, one part of the bill provided that the secretary was to review all reimbursing employer accounts for a 20-year period and to apply credit for benefits that were previously paid by fraud or an error that have been charged against that reimbursing employer's account and have not yet been recovered through normal recovery efforts. So there was a 20-year look back for that review. And as the committee may recall, the Secretary of Labor, or the Department of Labor rather, indicated that that might not be possible for them due to records issues, record retention, their record retention policy, and whether they would have access to such records. And so this proposed amendment removes the provision regarding the 20-year period and just indicates that the secretary is to review reimbursing employer accounts and apply credit as per the current language. And that is what the ruling does.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Yeah, so the Department of Labor is part of the executive branch, so we as legislators that will be on the council, we can't really make rules and regulations for them. And so we can just suggest them. And then secondly, the Department of Labor has indicated that they can identify these credits, but they cannot, because they're still on all of the statements, but they cannot recreate the records going back 20 years. So basically we're just making it so they just apply the credits and not have to recreate the records. Any questions on that? Seeing none, I'll close on the amendment. And so committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Long. All in favor say aye. All against say no. Motion passes. Any other amendments or discussions? I've got one more that we need to talk about. If you could send the appropriation portion over, Charles, that would be great.
Chairman, I've done so.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Okay, Charles, do you want to explain this amendment? I think everybody's getting it now.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. This amendment is a little bit more complex than some of the others. It concerns, first of all, if you look at the second page of the amendment, there is a provision there, a new section 5, that provides for an appropriation. This is an appropriation. It is. It does not require any further act. This is an appropriation of $450 million to the UI Trust Fund. The appropriation is to be from, basically it directs the director of the budget to determine the amount of monies received by the state. They're identified as monies from the federal government for aid to the state for coronavirus relief, as appropriated by some listed federal acts, which would include new monies that may be coming to the state for coronavirus relief from the federal government. And then of such identified monies, the director of the budget is to determine in the aggregate an amount equal to $450 million available in special revenue funds, and then certify that amount to the director of accounts and reports, and transfer the money to the Employment Security Fund. So it's a directed transfer of $450 million of federal money, either in existence that is available at this time or that will be available from federal enactments. And that money is to go to the Employment Security Fund. So that is what new Section 5 does. If you turn to the next portion of the balloon, on which is page 54 of the bill, you'll see that there's this is a part of the bill that dealt with the new rate tables. And we have a provision that if that full appropriation of $450 million is not made to the UI Trust Fund, as provided in Section 5. Then the contributing employers are to pay the rate as set forth in the standard schedule for the 2022 calendar year instead of the rate that they were going to pay, based on the not only the standard schedule, but also, as adjusted by the fund control table. So this changes the rate that contributing employers would pay in the event that $450 million is not transferred to the UI trust fund. The third part of the balloon, the committee will recall that in the bill currently, there's a provision that the secretary is to review information provided by the U.S. Department of Labor and also the information available to the secretary regarding fraudulent and improper payments. And currently in the bill, there was a provision that the secretary would make that determination every 60 days and then transfer money. The money would be transferred from the state general fund to the UI trust fund based on those determinations. So this amendment leaves that process in place, but states that it applies only if the full appropriation that we discussed in Section 5 is not made. So this provision, the 60-day transfers from the state general fund to the UI trust fund based on the secretary's review of federal information and Department of Labor information about the amounts of fraudulent and improper payments, that kicks in only if the full appropriation is not made. There's also a provision that if in the event the secretary recovers any improper payments from any party, and as we've heard in committee, that may be unlikely, but if the secretary does recover any improper payments, the improper payments are to be remitted to the state treasurer and deposited in the state general fund. So that takes care of any recovery of funds. Finally, there is a provision that you'll see in the attachment that provides, discusses the situation where if the amount of fraudulent and improper payments end up being more than $450 million. So there is a reconciliation that is to be made at the end of 2022, December 31, 2022, for the period of March 15, 2020 through December 31, 2022. The secretary has determined the total amount of the fraudulent and improper payments. If that total amount is more than $450 million, then that amount is transferred, the extra is transferred in 5 equal payments, transfers from the state general fund to the employment security fund on July 15, 2023, and then the subsequent 4 years. And then there's a provision that the governor can make the transfer from a different fund with approval of the State Finance Council. And then if the secretary determines that the amount of fraudulent or improper payments is less than that $450 million, then the secretary certifies that amount to the director of accounts and reports, and that money is then transferred from the UI trust fund back to the state general fund, and is to be used for COVID-19 related purposes as provided by appropriation acts of the legislature. And again, we have a provision that if the governor decides that the transfer should be made to a different fund other than the state general fund, then with the approval of the State Finance Council, that can be done. So that is what this balloon does, Chairman.
Charles, I think he did a darn good job of explaining the amendment. He had a lot of help from the Appropriation Committee revisers on this, and so we're very comfortable with it. Basically, this bill before this amendment could have a fiscal note of $1 billion because it allowed for the repayment of all fraud and all missed payments, or improper payments. And so it could have triggered a pretty large fiscal note. This is an attempt to limit the fiscal note. We started with the $450 million because we think that's on the low side of what this will end up being. We did put some provisions in there that these come from the federal coronavirus funds, and so that is another attempt to protect the SGF funds. And then there's some provisions in there in case we were incorrect about the amount of fraud, that it would be paid back to be used for other coronavirus appropriations. We feel that this fiscal note, or that the fraud and the missed payments or improper payments, will be closer to 700 million. And so in the case that it is, we allow for 5 years to repay it, so that it's not a big hit in 1 year. Any questions on the amendment, Representative Clayton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just at first blush here, I've just got some concerns. Can we do that with federal money?
It wouldn't be in here if we couldn't.
I've got some heartburn over this, just from the standpoint too of, I don't know if you're using the royal we, or if there's a group of people that were making this determination regarding this amendment, but yeah, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, guys. And I just, again, have concerns about whether we can actually do this, whether this will, stand up to scrutiny, and, just want to leave that up to discussion here.
Without this clause, we could take $1 billion out of the SGF in a time where we don't have it. This isn't, it's also addressed in there that if the monies cannot be done, and they have to find appropriations somewhere else, but this will limit the damage. Representative Shoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just trying to seek a little clarification on the rate table section of it. Am I understanding it correctly? If the $450 million gets appropriated, then we use essentially the current rate tables, but if that $400 million does not get used, we get an updated version of the rate tables that maybe Representative Johnson is working on. Am I understanding that part correctly, or?
So that part is, in the case that this money doesn't go in, it could trigger a really high rate, even on the new rate table. And so this would give the businesses 1 more year to adjust to that. So it would keep it at a neutral rate, given if the monies can't be moved into the fund.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I guess I would just also flag concern that, if the $450 million does get appropriated, I think that lessens the need for drastic changes in the rate tables that I know have been discussed. So.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ensure that this money that we're taking it from the CARES funding that will be utilized to go into this fund, we're denying PPE or whatever it may be from some organization that's in need of those federal dollars. And Mr. Chairman, it keeps being stated about the fraud dollars in the account. I believe, Mr. Chairman, and those on the post-audit committee of which you participated, those are federal dollars as well as state dollars, Mr. Chairman. And I'd just like to have recognition that those are 2 separate funds. Even though they came out of the UI fund, the federal dollars that were misappropriated were not because of Kansans. And the other fraud is the same way, but I would remind the committee that these are 2 separate pots that the money came out of, and not the state's UI fund, but the federal part is what I believe we're trying to make up. Mr. Chairman, we're taking care of the businesses, and I understand the issue of fraud. I'm just very concerned, again, about the lack of concern for the claimants today. There seems to be a lot of movement on ensuring that our businesses are made whole, or however you want to pose it. But, I'm very concerned about our claimants. We haven't taken much action on getting dollars to the claimants. You sat on the recovery committee with me, Mr. Chairman, and we haven't even moved forward on too many things in that. But this bill really leans heavily towards the business side, and those funds are going to have to be paid back one way or another. But the way I see it through this movement of CARES dollars is our businesses may not even have to pay much at all back into the fund.
Okay, well, in regards to the federal funds going into the trust fund versus being used to buy PPP, I think all the PPP was purchased out of the first coronavirus funds. The need for PPP is not as large as it once was, and most prudent states used federal dollars to put into their trust fund to keep it soluble. And so we did not. We asked several times, we even voted on it once, and it was vetoed by the governor. So it's been done by most other states, and that's what this does. In regards to the fraud, I did sit on that committee, and it was, in my opinion, the number that came out was extremely low. I'm looking forward to the rest of that audit. But even using the low number of $200 million that they found just through December, fraud increased at an increasing rate through December and January. And so that number will grow. And this also accounts for improper payments. And Kansas is ranked 5th in the nation for improper payments. Some of the other things that we're doing in this bill will help address that and bring it down. But you take 14% times $1.2 billion, and you're at 170 million right there. And so the 450 million, I think, is a close target on a very low estimate. In regards to the businesses being made whole, yes, these premiums are paid in by businesses only, no one else. They're paid in by businesses. This bill also makes schools whole who don't pay in. They don't have to pay for their fraud. Otherwise, they're going to have to pay for their fraud. And so this bill is kind of, it helps a lot of different businesses, a lot of different people, a lot of different companies. And in regards to not answering the phones or not helping the individuals, this bill, when I told you, when we started this process, we said it was going to be a long process, and this is the long-term fix. We can't do anything in this committee to help the people that can't get in on a phone call, on a phone line. We can't answer the phones. But we can rattle cages, and that's all we can do. We can shed light on the issues. We can point out that our constituents are killing themselves, but we can't answer phones. If I was in charge, we would hire a Kansas call center. We've got one in Lawrence that does UI claims for 17 other states. But our call center is located out of town, out of state. The call center in Lawrence, I believe, I'm going to have a meeting with them later today. They could ramp up 50 to 100 people a week. And that's what we need to do. But that process would take us too long to do it through this committee. We can merely make suggestions and shed light on the problem. Any further discussion on this amendment? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think just looking at this, I have some additional concerns regarding the two-subject rule. This is policy. We're putting appropriations into it. I know that people on the K-12 budget committee are fans of that, but I am not on that committee. I'm on commerce, and how is this okay for us to do that?
Charles, can you speak to that?
Chairman? Yeah, so I do not believe that this would present a two-subject issue because, you know, the transfer that we're talking about here is, you know, certainly directly related to the subject matter of the bill. So that's something that I can look at further, but just at first, you know, I don't think it would present an issue. It's something I can look at further.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Dodson.
Yes, just a quick question. Maybe Representative Rainman can address this. I didn't catch all the numbers when you were doing it last week. To the extent that we don't make 450 million, or to the extent that the number is far greater, can you give some relationship between the two tables? That is, kind of what the catch-up might be as a result of Table B?
Thank you, Representative.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Johnson.
I think I can get close. Certainly the 450 gives us a great cushion, and it's important in some way to come up with what dollars might have been lost to fraud and how we restore that to the fund. In the fund in general, an important piece for us that is recent is that it turned the corner and the balance wasn't as low as we thought it might have been earlier. There's a time where we were hearing 125 million might have been the balance, and it looks like our low was 247, and is currently at 273 million. So that affords some cushion between the tables. And as we go forward, there's those 13 different levels. And if you're in the center three, it's fairly similar. So if we hold them harmless in the first year, am I hearing that correct?
In the case that the 450 million does not come, then they would get an additional year to adjust the rate tables. They'd stay at the middle rate.
So with that, that's going to provide something in the neighborhood of 285, 290 million that comes in. Against the average claims was the challenge to get a handle on. But with that balance that we have and with those claims, most likely we can make it. The weeks to zero has changed dramatically. We were at 6 to 7 weeks to zero estimated. Now it's looking at 2 years on the numbers that are there. And of course, a number of things change on it as well. But with those dollars, and then let's say that all of this fails, we do have the backstop of borrowing for a period of time at zero where we can react and try and figure out other things if it is not working. But given that from one table to the other, we'd be looking at a difference of less than 100 million, most likely, I think we're okay to continue on the world where we are and take a look at it next year.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Will Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking back on that, Representative Johnson, what about the claims that we haven't paid or that are in the pipeline? I mean, where is that going to be? The claims. I mean, I'm alarmed. I have no idea how many claims are out there, but you know, we constantly are getting emails that people aren't getting paid. So if they ever did get paid, how much would that draw down that ending balance? I mean, I understand that's pretty fluid, but boy, that's a big concern about how many claims we do owe. Do we have any idea what kind of claims are out there?
Representative Johnson.
The most accurate answer I can give is no. We wouldn't have a good handle on what that could be. Using the projections that we have or what we can go from, I think we're at a point where we're starting to get on top of it. We just have way too many people that have been waiting way too long to get any attention.
A follow-up, I had a gal today that I've been dealing with for months, and she's 21 weeks behind. It's 21 weeks of unemployment due her. I think there could be a huge amount. I mean, we may be at zero. I'm not wishing anything or anything else. I'm just saying there's a lot of claims out there, and that's scary.
Representative, you make a good point there. But most of the people that are on the state unemployment side that started in March have miled out, for lack of a better term. And a lot of these claims that people are waiting on have to do with the federal dollars and the extended stuff that they're getting that don't come with state dollars. Representative Burrows for a second time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I beg the committee's indulgence. Representative Johnson did address one of the comments I was going to state in reference to the CARES dollars. We do have the fallback position of being able to borrow those federal dollars. And Mr. Chairman, I believe in the bill that all the businesses that can prove that fraud occurred on those businesses for the claimants, that they don't have to be repaid by the business. So I'm curious as to why we're taking this approach to utilize those dollars to put money back into the fund, as expedient as we are, when Mr. Johnson just gave the same presentation I was hoping to get before he made his statements. That was, I think that's something for the committee to give consideration without messing with our budget. That is an option that is out there to remedy, and those interests are usually zero.
Representative, the other side of this coin is that if we don't have an adequate amount of reserve in our trust fund, our businesses will lose their FUTA credits, their federal credits that they receive for the state being sound. And so that's why we need to get these dollars back in. And it was these, and if you recall, we started with $1.2 billion in this trust fund in March. And it's a shame that so much was squandered away and we didn't put the stops in earlier, but we didn't. And now we have to replace those funds somehow. Any further discussion? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Representative Burrows.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I understand that, and thank you for bringing that up. The amount of money is being earmarked by the hypothetical of how much money we think has been taken from the trust fund by fraud. Might I suggest that we give consideration to utilizing whatever dollars you want to put in there to keep them at the minimum that allows the federal qualifications for our fund? That might be a better floor and a target for us to identify versus walking around these fraud dollars that are being discussed and really trying to get a handle on those fraud dollars. I'm just trying to be prudent here with the amount of money. We have limited resources in which to put into these funds. And so I'm just trying to be fair and equitable and prudent in how we go about doing that. That's just point of consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll close on the amendment. Committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Long. All in favor say aye. All against say no.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The Representative Miller.
I'd like to be recorded as voting aye.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Representative Miller wants his aye vote recorded. And the ayes do have it. For further discussion, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because I think we need another amendment, I would like the indulgence to offer a conceptual one.
Go ahead.
And that would be on the discussion of getting a handle on what the numbers look like, that we just ask for a report each year that will show us for, and are we on a calendar year?
I believe we're on a fiscal year. Yeah, we're on a, this is calendar year.
So we would want whatever our fiscal as well as maybe a calendar year for the benefit of the legislature meeting in January to get an idea of the previous year's claims, the previous year's premiums, the projected claims, the projected premiums, the current balance, as well as what the projected balance would be a year out, and any suggestion for changes in the premium calculation. So, and I'm glad to give that list to the reviser.
Yeah, if you could email that to the reviser, that'd be great. And how many years do you want this to be ongoing?
Initially, I might suggest 3.
Okay. So Charles, he's going to email you the specifics. And Representative, if you could say that again for the benefit of the committee so we can discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would start with the current trust fund balance, the previous year's claims, the previous year's premiums, the projected year's claims and projected year's premiums, the projected year's balance, and suggested for changes to the premium calculations if needed.
For each of the next 3 Januaries.
Correct.
Charles, did you get that?
I tried to. I would greatly appreciate an email from Representative Johnson on it.
Okay. Seconded by Representative Hoffman. Okay. And a question from Representative Hoffman.
Reported to which committee?
Thank you, the Commerce Committee, to this committee.
Any other questions on the amendment or discussions? Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for my own clarification, it's a report from this oversight committee and to suggest to Commerce changes to the rate table or changes to the potential changes.
Representative Johnson.
I think it would be a report from the Department of Labor to this committee.
Any further? Representative Hsu?
Thank you. Part of me is a little uncomfortable with the department, I suppose, suggesting essentially a policy decision on rate changes, but that's just a concern. Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment by the representative, and as the committee sees fit to have or not have that, I was curious if there was any suggestion that we needed to consider, but certainly the decision would be to the body. I'd certainly be okay omitting that if that is the will of the majority.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close.
You've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Hoffman. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will we be making a motion to make this a substitute bill?
Yes, that's the plan. We've made so many changes, it would be way too confusing for anybody to read the thing.
Thank you. That is a motion that I would support. Thank you.
Well, we're making some progress. Representative Miller.
On that last topic, could we let Representative Hsu offer that amendment or motion?
That would be his second motion in as many days that would be approved.
Yes, but he'd be setting new records at 500.
The current motion is with Representative Long, seconded by Representative Hoffman. So he would be the one to have to make it. Seeing no further discussion on the bill, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to the many amendments put on this bill, I move that a substitute bill be created and we pass out House substitute for HB 2196 favorable.
Seconded by Representative Hoffman. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none.
I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Hoffman. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no.
No.
Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Committee, I wanted to try to work another bill today, but I think we're just going to be out of time, so you got off easy. We'll wait till after turnaround. Thank you. Thanks, we're adjourned.